Hello and welcome to the New Mexico Main Street Great Blocks on Main Street pre-application webinar that's scheduled for today, July 9th, 2018. My name is Anna Bly and I'm the Communications and Media Specialist here at Main Street. And today's session is led by our co-director, Rich Williams. Hey, Rich.
Hey, Anna, thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. We know how busy you all get. But we thought it was good to kind of go over some of the background and information related to the Great Blocks application, because many of you are considering on applying this year. And if not this year, do think about next year if it doesn't seem to fit what you need this year, but we'll probably do another round next year. Just a little background on where Great Blocks came from. I was traveling 5 years ago down through the Southwest, out around Grand Canyon, and went out to Utah and came on back through Colorado for a couple of weeks. And going through Arizona, we stopped on Route 66, Seligman, Arizona. And I was absolutely stunned. A lot of the communities are similar to ours in Arizona, very small, rural, and they're all struggling to figure out how to take limited resources and create some impact. And sure enough, in the middle of Seligman, there's a 2-block section that has been revitalized. And it was packed with people. There were all kinds of people in the daytime and the evening just doing things there. And talking with a few of the folks, they're not a Main Street program, but they're saying they had started in a core place and worked their way outward. And I thought about that, and I realized some of us have smaller districts, some of us have much bigger districts. And I thought to myself, well, maybe we could create something like that. So Great Blocks came out of that, taking a look at probably a core area that needs some real special attention, and that way you can focus your limited resources, and frankly our limited resources, to assist you in sparking something into work. So what we consider Great Blocks is an opportunity. It's comprehensive. It's both redevelopment and revitalization, and it's a core area in your commercial district. You're going to see some slides from some of our existing Great Blocks districts, not necessarily related to each other. But over time, we've done a lot of planning, a lot of dreaming. Once in a while, we get a building done here, a building there, and it doesn't seem to synergize what we really need to do. So we're looking at a core area, and while this particular resource for Great Blocks this year is focused on public infrastructure, it really is going to have a revitalization pathway for the next several years for your organization. So it's also an intensive design and engineering program. This first section in particular, what we do is hire a landscape architect, somebody who is familiar with our communities, who works in our communities and has an understanding of your community, to be able to come in and work with you in terms of looking at that core area and figure out how best to improve the public infrastructure to support economic development activity. Our main goal is that economic vitality, commercial building revitalization, and moving forward with creating more opportunity for businesses. So we are a catalytic redevelopment project. This fund only funds the first phase for construction documents. This year, the funding is not from capital outlay. The funding is coming from our general operations fund. So we will be hiring the contractor, not you folks. Some of our past programs have had capital outlay funding to do this, and they've hired a person directly. Some of them have gone through us to hire that person to work with. So this time it's not capital outlay. It is coming out of a separate operational fund. Thanks to the legislature and the coalition for expanding our funding, it made it possible. What we're looking for is 2 to 3 blocks that are cohesive, that are related to each other, and that have vacant or underutilized buildings for building rehabilitation, and eventually that business expansion and opportunities for local entrepreneurship. So it's not just a matter of coming in and putting some new street poles in, some trees, some fancy stuff. It's a matter of finding an area that the public infrastructure is lagging, and it's become a real barrier to getting reinvestment from the private sector in. So by building confidence, around public infrastructure, we then can move forward in the renovation work of the buildings and the business work of getting people in, either expanding existing businesses or finding those local entrepreneurs. So this is just the first phase of funding. The second phase, which is not funded yet, it'll happen after you have your construction documents, is securing the funding for public infrastructure. So it'll be the actual construction itself. Now that's usually capital outlay, and that's usually capital outlay that is matched by, it's usually matched by federal dollars. We've had good partnerships with MDOT if your district is within New Mexico DOT, Department of Transportation area. We've had good experience with CDBG funds. There's just a variety of sources. And we usually vet our projects. Once the documents are in place, we use a process called Fund It that comes out of the Economic Development Department that our financial team runs quarterly. And they bring all the funders together, state and federal, to vet your project and hear if they can take a piece of it. And we've had some pretty good success with both Raton and Las Vegas and now Tucumcari, having different agencies step forward and say, hey, we can take this slice of it. We can bring you resources for this piece of it. And somebody else will say, we can bring you resources for that piece of it. So that second phase, which comes after the construction documents, is really getting the construction work done. And it'll take time. It's not something that happens overnight. You can depend on 2 or 3 years to do that work. The third phase comes with a lot of New Mexico Main Street technical assistance. And by the way, we provide technical assistance through the whole process. We don't just drop somebody into your community. We'll be there working with you to assist you through that first phase and each of the subsequent phases. So that third phase is now taking advantage of the construction being done and moving on to renovation, restoration, and rehabilitation of buildings, and finding a business development process that works in terms of expansion opportunities and local entrepreneurship opportunities. We actually secured a USDA grant for our existing Great Blocks programs this year, and our staff has been working on that with our local Great Blocks communities to help assist new business owners and existing business owners to capitalize on the investments being made by the state. So that brings me to the legislative investment. Legislature, this money all comes from the legislature. We have performance measures, and you guys know that because Keith is usually the one calling you up saying, guys, we got to get that quarterly report into the Legislative Finance Council. And they're very pleased with the investments that all of you make with some of our support and assistance in getting your downtowns working better, more economically viable, returning and restoring vitality to the district. So the legislature really wants to hear how the impact is with these kinds of products. For Great Blocks, we're talking probably a 3 to 5 year process. So it doesn't happen overnight. So we really want to make sure that the expectations you have for coming into this program, you understand what you're looking at, because we're really going to tailor and focus a lot of our energy into that Great Blocks area. Now, I know there'll probably be some business owners and some property owners who are concerned that they're being left out. That's why you need to think carefully through where you want to synergize and catalyze. Because what happens is, it's like, if you haven't heard me talk like this before, it's what my grandmother used to say was, too little butter on too much bread, we don't have the impact. The bread and the butter don't taste like very much. You lose the taste of the butter when it's spread too thin. And that's the problem, what we're trying to address with the Great Blocks. Catalyze a core area and then watch it begin to grow outward from that core area. So our resources for that period, as long as it takes to get through the construction documents phase 1, the construction phase 2, and then the business development, is going to be focused primarily in that area. That's not to say our TA and other resources won't be available to you on a special case-by-case basis, but we expect your organization and your local government partner to really help us focus the energy into this area to really help you move redevelopment and economic development forward. So why? It's about leveraging private reinvestment. A lot of our downtowns have suffered for a long time, 50, 60, some cases 80 years since any improvements have been made downtown. You're lucky to have a stormwater system, much less if it works. It was probably undersized years ago. And the pedestrian walkways have given way to nothing but broken up concrete, asphalt patches. It's an unattractive and undesirable, and for many pedestrians, it feels unsafe. So to get private sector to fix up the building, we really need to repair the public right-of-way. So it's really about, getting that first step forward. The construction documents are critical because most funding will not pay for construction documents per se, just like it doesn't pay for planning. So for us to make this investment, it's because we are expecting us then to move forward with the full construction as we pull the funding together, and then move forward with the building and business redevelopment and reworking of that. So it's a critical point. Now, what was interesting to us was I had seen this as a linear process, like I'm talking about now, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. What actually began to happen was, because something was already happening in the community, people started selling vacant properties, people started fixing up vacant or underutilized properties, businesses started moving in, even though the construction documents weren't finished, much less the construction itself. It stimulated an interest by the private sector to be part of something that was ongoing and moving forward. So let's talk about qualifying communities for a little bit. What we want to see is a full-time director. While our resources often go to the local government because of the anti-donation clause, and if you don't know what that is, I'm not going to go into it now, but we can talk about it. But it means that when we have capital outlay, it's got to go to your local government to administer for you, because we can't give money to businesses or nonprofits. So it's going to be real important to have somebody in your organization who's going to point this with the city officials to work with them, with the consultant. And that means a full-time director, and it means you're an accredited program. Those are critical elements. An accredited program is one that's high functioning. And I know some of you are in different stages of accelerator or affiliate. This is why you want to strive towards getting that national accreditation, because it brings those additional resources, not because you have a title, but because now you're showing capacity to really build out something that's a lot of work beyond just your day-to-day Main Street work. So the local government has got to be a partner in this process. That's why we're always encouraging you all the time. Work with your city officials. Work with your city leadership that's been elected. They need to know what's going on. They need to be engaged in that partnership. And our consultant will work on a series of community meetings and meetings with your organization and meetings with the city to make sure we're all on the same page as we work towards this major economic development improvement process. So the other qualifying issue is if you have Main Street public infrastructure funding currently, and you haven't successfully implemented that funding completely, you're not eligible at this point in time. You'll have to wait till next year. And future applications to our public infrastructure fund, which is different than this Great Blocks Fund. We'll be opening up the public infrastructure fund in about a month and a half. That if you've got the Great Blocks Award, you're not going to be able to get the public infrastructure award until you need construction dollars. And that public infrastructure funding has been critical in terms of matching in Raton, economic development, administrative federal funding, and some other resources. A TAP grant, that's a transportation action planning grant from the federal highway system. Those things are critical. So we want to bring some construction dollars to the table, but it won't complete the entire project. On average, these projects are between $1 and $2 million, falling around 1.5. We don't want you to get, look at all the bells and whistles that can be done. What are the things that we can do that are reasonable for the area that you're picking, and that will be able to be repeated throughout the rest of the district at some point in time? You cannot have reverted state or federal funds in the last 5 years. You've always got to be careful. It's one thing if you get $100,000 and 500 of it doesn't get spent. That's not real reversion. It's when you get $100,000 and you revert 50,000 of it, because that funding could have gone to another community that had needs. So we really want you to think about your budgets, be real careful when you go for public infrastructure funding or any state and federal funds. Remember I talked about Fund It? That group of people that our financial team come together and they talk about your communities if you successfully implemented their funding. So they know across the agencies which of you have successfully moved your projects forward and which of you have not. And that often means they're not going to bring their resources, their funds to the table. And then the final one is a clean audit. This is something Governor Martinez started requiring through the Department of Financial Administration about 5 years ago. Annually, your local government has got to go through an audit process. Its findings have got to be clean. It's certified up here in my department through our Administrative Services Division. They'll work with DFA. If you're clean, the money moves over. If you're not clean, if your local government has not produced an audit that is clean or one that has been signaled as having problems and not corrected those problems, that money will revert back to us and you won't be able to move forward on it. So another good reason to be working with your government partner, not to harass them, but to really explore, what are the opportunities here and why it's important for everybody to make sure they're expending their funding and doing clean audits on a regular basis. So the components, and I'm not going to go into the entire application, but the content should give us a good picture of what the area is that you're looking at to invest these resources into, yours and ours. So an overlay view, and we have past applications that we'd be happy to share with you, and all the mapping of different areas within your district, such as if you're an historic district, if you have different components to overlays that might impact if you're an arts and cultural district, what those boundaries are, where your historic district is. The people evaluating these applications don't necessarily know your community that way, so you want to talk to people to help them understand why you're choosing the area. So pictures of the buildings in the street, pictures of areas needing remediation and upgrade. Where do you see these resources being best put into that public infrastructure to assist you in your work with future building renovation and business development, and any other documents that the application requires. Providing specific building renovation and rehabilitation opportunities helps us to understand what you're trying to achieve in the area. Providing street improvements, creative placemaking opportunities you wish to see. And don't forget, we've got our creative placemaking workshops coming up in Raton, the second week of August 8th through the 10th. So hopefully you'll all be there to participate in that. A lot of hands-on work. It's going to be a lot of fun. Providing business development strategies you would like to pursue based on your economic transformation strategies. Those are kind of critical in terms of taking a look at how does this line up with your overall work of your organization. We don't want to create another whole separate activity that is distinctly different from the work you're trying to accomplish, but something that fits very much in the center of the work that you're trying to accomplish with your economic transformation strategies. So, last thoughts. Please remember this is a targeted, comprehensive economic redevelopment project. Although in phase one we're focusing primarily on the construction documents, we really want to see the big picture and that it results in a construction-ready project. Right now you're looking at what the plaza is what Las Vegas would like to see. They did a 10-month community visioning process. This is the visual conceptual work. It ends up with a pilot schematic drawings. The landscape architect that we hires an engineer to deal with all the engineering issues. Most of our communities have major drainage issues. Sometimes they're utility issues. In Raton, they actually have basements, and the old coal chutes to heat the buildings were right there on the street, and every time it rained, they would all flood, and the basements were flooded. So there are a lot of remediation issues that come up in the discovery process. So you need to think about this comprehensively and how we're going to improve the opportunities and the work that you want to accomplish in that area. Last thoughts. Our revitalization specialists are available to assist you. That doesn't mean they're going to write the RFP for you, the proposal, but they're willing to navigate this with you and think about it. Just don't wait for the last couple days. You're going to have several weeks to be able to pull this together. So we want you to think about it, think what you need. I know several of them have already indicated if there are design issues like Will or Amy Bell in terms of creative placemaking issues, there might be opportunities there that you can think about and share some of those ideas and get some feedback from them. Amy Barnhart has actually offered to take a look at grant opportunities and stuff so that you build an application that's more comprehensive in terms of how you expect to fund things. And then the last thought, your project may better fit the application process for public infrastructure. That public infrastructure fund exists for funding projects to move them forward, individual projects. Not a larger, necessarily comprehensive project, one that still has economic impact, but not necessarily one that has this level of comprehensive activity over a 3 or 5 year period. Often it's an improvement on the street or something that stands alone and doesn't interrupt all the other kinds of work that you're looking at doing. So go for it.
All right. Okay, everybody listen in. Thanks for joining us. We will be able to do some Q&A. And if you do have microphone capabilities on your computer, you might just want to make sure those are happening, or if you've dialed in. I am seeing a question from Carla Hamill, so I'm going to unmute you, Carla, and see if we can reach you. Are you there, Carla? Carla? All right. Let's see. You're also welcome to type in your questions as well. All right. Linda DiMarino. Do you have a question, Linda?
No.
Okay. All right. I think some of you were just responding graciously as earlier to our call for if you can hear and see. Again, don't hesitate. You can right now if you want, raise your hand if you do have questions or type them in. Conversely, I know Rich will be a support if you guys have a question as you're digging into the application process. This was just a really nice overview of what the Great Blocks program has so far accomplished and is looking to accomplish. Do you have any additional remarks, Rich?
Well, I know in previous applications, we've had some questions about covering a larger area. We can't afford to do that, but if you think there is a larger area that you'd like to consider at some level, and you have local government funding to accomplish that, we'd be willing to negotiate that with you to see how we might be able to work. But our biggest issue is you don't want multiple consultants working in the same area. So the condition would probably be that the local government would have to hire the consultant that we hire to continue to work. And that actually has happened post some of the products that we've done already, taking a look at visualizing conceptually at minimum the next section of blocks to be done. So it's something we are open to talking to you about if you think that's something that would assist you, but you would have to pay for it. And this can get very expensive depending on the engineering problems. It's usually not the landscape architecture side of it, the actual street, the visible street. It's usually what's under the street that begins to raise the cost of these kinds of products. You can figure probably between $30,000 and $50,000 a block. And it all depends on the engineering issues and barriers we've got. But we're open to talking to you about that.
And I did have a question come up from Lisa Pellegrino-Spear of Clovis Main Street. We're currently working on our sidewalks. Can this be something that we can utilize to further our public infrastructure beyond this?
It depends on what the construction documents look like for that, Lisa. I think you want to take a look at who's actually doing your construction work and how this gets integrated into that. And part of the issue is, because this is early design work, we'd have to take a look at what you've accomplished to date to make sure that there is a continuity between the kinds of work that's being done currently. And I assume it's the city doing that, with the work that we would like to accomplish in a larger setting. By the way, this is a community process, so there will be communities engaged in the whole process, and a number of feedback sessions with the community invited to be able to take a look at each stage of the development of the construction documents.
Let me see if I can unmute you, Lisa, because she also stated they have an TAP grant as well as working with the city. Are you there, Lisa? All right, she might be calling in. So yeah, she has clarified some of their partners.
Yeah, and I don't know how, if you have an MDOT TAP grant, which is a Transportation Action Planning grant, they usually require their own designers to be used in that. So I'd want to make sure to understand who the designers are for the development of that planning and landscape design, that it harmonizes with the contractor that we hire.
Okay. All right. And I think, as you know from attending, some of you, this is your first webinar with us, but a common theme is that as you listen to this, or maybe listen to it again, we are recording this session and we will place it on the Main Street YouTube channel as well as the Main Street website with a link to the Great Blocks on Main Street application as well as the PowerPoint presentation. But as you're thinking about things, you know, you're driving back from the webinar or doing something and you're realizing you want to prepare the grant, please reach out to Main Street and certainly to our presenter today, Rich Williams, for assistance with that as the deadline comes up. Do you have the deadline and we can remind everybody? Sorry.
Let me pull that up. It is due here August 24th by 2 p.m. For those of you who have not submitted an application to us before, it literally has to be in the office before 2 p.m. on the 24th of August. We don't take any responsibility for the Postal Service not delivering or losing stuff. We usually recommend, if you're near us, to drive it in. If you're not, make sure you get a code number, and the carrier, whoever you send it with, promises to deliver it directly to the department in the timeline that you want, because there's absolutely nothing we can do. That's a procurement process of the state, and if it shows up even 5 minutes late, it'll be rejected at the front desk. So do be careful if you're thinking of applying to prepare yourself to get that application in on time. And as Anna said, we're here to help any way we can. There may be additional issues that you have that you don't want to share with the whole group. They're individual issues, or it may be that stuff comes up after you've had a chance to digest this a little bit. Please do talk to your board. You can apply on your own. I think most all of your staff, you really need your board's support in this process, and you're going to need your city's support in this process, because they will be an integral part of the work over the next couple of years. Oh, and by the way, we only have funding for one project this year. We wish you had more. Hopefully next year we can do 2.
All right. All right. Well, thank you all very much for tuning in today for the webinar. And again, as we mentioned, please reach out with any questions that you have. We appreciate your spending your lunch hour with us.
Thank you.